Happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. Back with Ranger in Time D-Day Battle on the Beach. We are in Chapter 9, and it is called Enemy or Friend. So where we left off on Friday, Ranger and Leo found a building that they were going to hide in, and they realized they got there and realized that someone was in there. So I'm guessing that's what they're figuring out, whether that person is an enemy for them or a friend. Leo stared up at the soldier, a tall, skinny man with short black hair and brown skin. His uniform didn't look like the ones worn by the German soldiers who patrolled Leo's village. Could he be one of the allies? S'il vous plaît, monsieur, de cherche mon chat, Leo blurted. He lifted his hand so the soldier could see that he meant no harm and spoke the words in English too. Please, sir, I'm looking for my cat. The man's face softened, but he didn't lower his gun. He motioned for Leo to come into the boxy shelter. Ranger went too. Is that dog yours? The man asked in English. Leo was so relieved to know that this man wasn't a German soldier that he almost forgot to answer. When the soldier pointed to the dog, Leo said, No, I thought he was one of the war dogs. Leo had heard about dogs that helped soldiers in battle. The soldier lowered his gun and held out his hand. Ranger sniffed it. This was the Walt man from the ditch on the beach. He had lost his helmet and gotten a lot dirtier, but Ranger recognized his scent. He licked the man's hand and the soldier gave him a rough pat on the head. Must be, Walt said. Dog was on the beach first thing this morning. Lord knows what became of his handler. The soldier looked out of the pillbox and over the sand. The gunfire had quieted, but fallen men were everywhere. Walt wondered if whoever brought the dog ashore was among them. Leo leaned against the shelter's cool concrete wall. Ranger sat down beside him. You speak good English, the soldier said. Leo shrugged. A bit. I practiced so I could talk to the Allies when they came. He looked up at the man. Are you American? Walt nodded. Sergeant Walter Burrell of the 320th. Where do you live? He asked. Leo pointed over the ridge toward what was left of the Blancs' farmhouse. What's your name? The soldier asked. Leo's voice caught in his throat. Earlier today he would have said he was Henry Blanc, just as he told people for the past 2 years. But the Allies had come. Could he tell the truth now? My name is Leo Ruberstein, Leo whispered. No one here knows that. He added, I live in Paris. It was bad there. When Mimir brought me here, she told me to call myself Henry, to be safe. No name's going to keep you safe wandering around a battlefield. You're lucky you didn't come over that ridge 15 minutes ago, when we were flushing Nazis out of the pillbox. You need to get home, and I have to get back to my balloon. Balloon? Leo was confused. Walt pointed out the window opening. In the distance, Leo saw 2 men holding onto a rope, trying to control a big silvery thing in the sky. It looked like a giant grape potato with a tail. Nothing like any balloon Leo had seen. What is it? He asked. A barrage balloon. Walt spoke as he gathered up supplies that the Germans had left behind in the shelter. He tucked boxes of bullets and matches into his pack on the ground. We're raising a curtain of them over the beach for protection. So here we have Leo, Ranger, and Walt. What? Leo asked. The soldier was speaking so quickly that it was hard for Leo to understand much. We stagger the balloons, Walt said. It forces German planes to fly higher, so their aim isn't so good for bombing. When they're flying higher, they're better targets for our big guns on the ground too. Leo stared out at the men wrestling with the balloon on the windy beach. It tugged and pulled at its ropes. Leo was searching his mind for the right English words to ask more about it when he heard a jingle in the bushes. Belle? Leo ran from the pillbox, dived into a bush, and pulled out the black and white cat. She let out an angry meow, but settled down when Leo stroked the fur between her ears. He carried her back to the little shelter and announced, I found my cat. I will go home now. Or, Leo swallowed hard, home is far away in Paris. Even this temporary home with the Blancs is gone now. I will go back to the field. We dug a ditch. Walt shook his head. The fighting has moved over the ridge. but we may not have liberated your village yet. It's not safe. I'll come back when I finish my work and take you then. Stay here for now." He hoisted his pack onto his shoulders and stayed down. Just because the Germans are gone doesn't mean that they won't be back. "Where are you going?" Leo asked. "Back to the beach," Walt answered. He slapped his thigh with his hand. "Come on, dog, I need your help." Ooh, so Walt's going to use Ranger. Chapter 10, Through the Minefield. Walt stepped out of the pillbox. He took a deep, shaky breath and looked toward the beach. Just a few hours ago, he'd been one of the dozen men who marched up the sandy shelf that led to the plateau. But this stretch of beach was full of buried landmines, hidden dangers that exploded with one wrong step. Only 4 of the 12 men had made it through. They'd fought their way up to the pillbox and taken the 2 German soldiers who had been there as prisoners. The other 3 American soldiers had taken those men to a holding area. Now, to get back to his balloon crew, Walt had to cross the deadly stretch of sand again. He started walking away from the pillbox at a good pace, but quickly, slow to a stop. He looked at the uneven sand in front of him. Then he looked at Ranger. Walt had never worked with the military dogs trained to sniff for the explosives in landmines. He heard that they would stop when they came into a mine. That was how it was supposed to work anyway. He could only pray this dog was trained well. Walt gave Ranger a pat on the neck. "Go ahead, dog." Ranger looked up. He could tell the soldier wanted him to do something, but he wasn't sure what. "Go ahead, dog," wasn't a command he'd heard from Luke or Dad in training. The soldier didn't seem to be looking for anyone. He just seemed worried about the sand. What was Ranger supposed to do about that? "Go on, then." Walt patted Ranger's backside and pointed over the stretch of the beach. Ranger sniffed the air. It was still smoky, but at least most of the booming had stopped. He took a careful step forward. The sand was wet from the morning rains. It felt squishy and gritty under his paws. Ranger took another step and sniffed at the sand. It smelled wet and earthy and fishy, just like the beach at home. But here there were other scents too. Boots and gasoline, sickness and sweat and blood. Ranger stepped forward again. Walt stayed close beside him. He kept his nose low, creeping over the beach. There. Ranger stopped and sniffed. Something was off. Different. Just ahead, the sand had a strange chemical scent. Ranger had smelled it once before. After one of his search and rescue training sessions with Luke and Dad, some men had visited to see which dogs might be good at different kinds of work. They'd waved a package under Ranger's nose. It had smelled a lot like this sand, earthy and dangerous and sharp. The men taught Ranger and a few other dogs to find a particular scent. The dogs sniffed packages, and if they sat down when they smelled it, they got a treat. The next time the men came to visit, they brought a fancy spinning wheel with slots of 4 containers. 2 of the slots were empty. One had food hidden inside. It smelled like hot dogs to Ranger. And one had a package with the funny, sharp smell. Ranger was good at finding the scent. Almost every time the men spun the wheel, Ranger pawed at the right slot, sat down, and earned his treat. Here in the sand, the smell was mixed with other things, but it was the same scent. Ranger could tell. He sat down, then looked up at Walt and waited for his reward. Walt didn't pull a dog treat out of his pocket. Instead, he squinted at the sand. After a few seconds, he let out a long, shaky breath and put a trembling hand on Ranger's head and said, "Good dog. Good job." He turned Ranger away from the strange smell of sand and waited for Ranger to go ahead again. Ranger crept forward, sniffing at the beach. He understood what his job was now. He tried not to pay attention to all of the other smells. He and Walt passed close to 2 or 3 men sprawled in the sand, all crumpled up and still, but he kept going. So here is Ranger and Walt in the beach, and Ranger's here smelling for that scent. Twice more, Ranger found the earthy chemical sound in the sand, and just ahead of them. Both times he stopped and sat down, and Walt circled around the spot. "This should be about the end of it," Walt said. Ranger stayed in front, but they moved along more quickly. The sand grew rockier, with smooth pebbles mixed in. The rush of the sea grew louder. Ranger paused and lifted his head. The ocean was so much closer now. It had swallowed up most of the beach that had been there this morning. "Walt, hurry!" someone shouted over the roar of the sea. Two men were staggering through the waves, walking one of the giant, silvery balloons to shore from a boat. The balloon tugged at its cables as if it were a wild flying dog on a leash. "Hold on!" Walt started forward, but Ranger darted in front of him. He was supposed to go first. That was how it worked. Ranger sniffed the same. There! Ranger sat down, but Walt's eyes were fixed on the balloon men. He didn't stop and circle carefully around them. He nudged at Ranger. "Go on, dog. They need my help." Ranger barked again, but it didn't matter. Walt pushed forward through the sand. I'm going to stop right there. I'll be back tomorrow, but the next chapter is called Up and Away. And we get to find out, hopefully, Walt made it through that because Ranger was trying to help him and he didn't listen. But have a great Monday. I'll be back tomorrow.